is no secret that the gaming series The Legend of Zelda is an awesome one filled to the brim with excellent games. That said, unless you were introduced to the gaming series as a child, it can be kind of daunting, borderline overwhelming to figure out which game you should start with should you want to get into this franchise. There's just a plethora of options to choose from, not just from the sheer amount of Zelda games that there are, but from the types of games there are. Handheld, main console, 2D, 3D, different gaming mechanics, and all that good stuff. So where does one even start? Well, I have some thoughts on that question that might be of some help. Okay, before I get into this list, and it's decently extensive, okay, it might be a pretty long video, let's go over a few things. First of all, I have not had the chance to play every single Zelda game, and it's mainly 2D and handheld Zelda games that I haven't had the chance to play. So with that in mind, there might be some Zelda games that I don't even mention on this list that would fit into the categories I have created and thus might be perfect for you. So don't just take my word for it. Go out and explore a little bit yourself too. The second thing, categories. I am splitting up this video into categories, like someone who's never played a video game, someone who's only played Nintendo games, someone who's never played a Nintendo game but has played plenty of Sony and Microsoft games. That said, I'm not gonna go crazy here, so let me tell you what I am going to be covering. Those that have never played a video game or barely any video games, maybe phone games, I don't know, something like that. Those who have played plenty of video games, just never Nintendo. Those who have played plenty of video games, including Nintendo, just not Zelda. Those who love retro games, and those who are story lovers. But if you don't fit into any of those categories, which you may not, I will also have a category called You Can't Go Wrong with These Choices. And the third thing / the last thing before we get going here. This is highly subjective. I mean, yeah, I'm gonna try and use as much objective thought processing as possible, because I mean there are some games that have like a long tutorial process, and therefore that might not be good for someone who plays a lot of video games, but that would be perfect for someone who hasn't ever really played a video game. That said, this again is highly subjective. It's based on my perception of the games that I am listing and the games that I have played from the Zelda franchise, and try as I might to leave bias by the wayside, it's gonna creep in no matter what. That's just how this works. So again, don't just take my word for it. Get other opinions as well. And even once you get all those other opinions, none of us that have played the Zelda series can know 100% which game is best for you to start with, because you are your own person and there are just so many factors and facets to this. So enough rambling, let's get going. Now I'm actually going to start off with the games that you just can't go wrong with. So the games I'm putting in this category, as I said, are games that if you start with one of these, they're all good options. They're all classics in their own way. They all show off different elements of the Zelda series, and they're all just really solid games. There's a lot of solid games, but I feel like these three in particular really capture certain essences of Zelda. Even if you start with one of these and it doesn't turn out to be your favorite of the whole Zelda franchise, because there's a lot, I feel like it'll still give you a good idea of what you're in for. The first in this category is Ocarina of Time, which can be found on the N64, the GameCube, or an updated version on the 3DS. Now bear in mind, I personally don't like the graphics of the 3DS one, but it did fix a couple of gameplay things that it makes certain dungeons and temples less tedious, such as the water temple. And hey, I know that's a really cliche choice to put on this list, but it's cliche for good reason. It is a classic. Even though the Zelda formula was founded in its predecessor, A Link to the Past, you see it come to life in a new way in Ocarina of Time, in the 3D world. And personally, I just don't like 2D style gaming, although I'm sure A Link to the Past is absolutely wonderful. In fact, I know it. I've watched so much gameplay of it. It's solid game. But if you're like me and you would prefer the 3D style, then Ocarina of Time would be a really good choice. Solid gameplay mechanics, really fun and creative dungeons and temples. It's just an overall classic that if you've heard of The Legend of Zelda, you've most likely heard of this one. Ocarina of Time just really encompasses a lot of what makes the Zelda series the Zelda series, so you really can't go wrong with choosing this one first. It was also my first Zelda game, so there might be some bias in that, I don't know. Although technically it was Wind Waker that got me really into the Zelda series, so... The next option on this list is Breath of the Wild for the Wii U and the Switch. Yeah, I know, it's another cliche because it was just such a huge thing and there are people that feel like it was overpraised, even though it definitely wasn't. It's that awesome of a game. What's ironic about putting this on the list is that it completely threw out of the window the Zelda formula, but it still retained a lot of what makes Zelda Zelda. I just really think this is a game that anyone can enjoy. The open world gives you the freedom to do whatever you want and explore whatever you want, but at the same time, if you do want some direction, it doesn't leave you in the dark. It does give you an idea of what you should do next. It's also just so beautiful. I love it. The last option on this list is A Link Between Worlds for the 3DS. Now this one might seem like a really odd choice, but hear me out. Yes, it's a 2D handheld game, but it's also like not 2D. If you've seen any images of the game, or better yet, you're someone who does play Zelda and you're watching this, and so you have played it possibly, then I think you know what I'm talking about. Honestly, A Link Between Worlds is a really solid game that I think gets a little bit forgotten. It started off as a remake of A Link to the Past, but then slowly took on a life of its own, especially with the really cool mechanic of being a painting that goes into the wall, which sounds weird if you've never played it, but it's really, really cool. It still retains a whole lot, and I mean a lot of elements of A Link to the Past, but it's just kind of updated and made into its own thing. It's a great mix between the Zelda formula, but also a lot of freedom and like dungeon order, or rather than finding an item in the dungeon, like a specific dungeon, you can just get all the items whenever you want, which is a really interesting take. Honestly, if you like handheld games or would be interested in handheld games, this is a really solid first option. Unless you're talking to someone who's played the game, a lot of people kind of underrate this game. At least that's what I've gotten when I talk to people about it. Like, it has such solid gameplay mechanics and puzzles. I love it so much. So many moments where I'd finish a puzzle and go, oh, that's how you do it. And I love those moments. It was really, really satisfying. So if you're okay with starting with a handheld game, this would be, in my opinion, your best option. Alright, now that we're done with this category, I do want to say, before we jump into the next one, that the games I just mentioned, Ocarina of Time, Breath of the Wild, and A Link Between Worlds, they might appear on later lists, so I won't talk about them as much, but just know that they might appear on other lists. There are crossovers. Now, what if you're someone that has never ever played a video game, or maybe you've played a little bit, you've played like Minesweeper or Solitaire on your phone or on a really old, big, clunky hard drive computer, but really you've never held a gaming controller and it feels a little foreign to you? What do? The Zelda series seems so interesting to you, but you've never really touched a video game. What do? Or maybe you did play some video games when you were a kid, but maybe you were the little sibling that never got to really play, you more so watched. And just later on down the line, you never played it again, but you would like to get back into it. Well, here are some options that might be good for you. Bear in mind, if you've legit never held a controller, there is a little bit of a learning curve. Not a huge one, but you will have to get used to it. It's like learning a new remote control for a TV. You get used to it. So for you guys, I was thinking of Zelda games that have a little bit of a longer tutorial process in the beginning, something to really help you understand the gameplay mechanics of that specific Zelda game, and just help you get started. Some call it hand-holding. Whatever, I don't mind it. Either way, it might be a good option for you. So with that in mind, I would look into one of these. Skyward Sword or Twilight Princess HD. Ocarina of Time could fit here too. It has a decently simple tutorial process, I think. So Skyward Sword, which is on the Wii U. Beautiful story, great music, fun dungeons, and a bit of hand-holding. Okay, a lot of it. But honestly, if you've never picked up a controller ever, this would be good for you, and I think you would appreciate it. The thing is, in the game, your companion Fi, or Fi, however you want to pronounce it, follows you around and is basically the Master Sword. Well, I won't get into all of that. And she gives you a lot of pointers and tips throughout the game. Yes, some people find it annoying, but I think, again, you would find it helpful. And while this is a motion control game, don't let that deter you. Your companion Fi will help you out. Hence, again, why I think this would be a good option if you've legit never played a video game. Now for the other option, Twilight Princess HD. And I say HD specifically because the GameCube one was great, The Wii one first introduced motion controls like before Skyward Sword, and it flips the whole game, which I found kind of annoying, but that's because I'm left-handed. That's a whole nother thing for another day. But the HD one, Wii U, updated graphics, and kind of like what Ocarina of Time 3D on the 3DS did for Ocarina of Time, it fixed a couple of mechanics that were a little bit tedious, but makes it that much easier. So do Twilight Princess HD. This Dark Zelda game has some of my favorite music and favorite characters. It also has a decently long tutorial process spread throughout the beginning of Link's journey and story. Long-time hardcore gamers, yeah, they might find it annoying, but you who have never really done a lot with video games, you'll like it. It'll be very helpful for you. I don't think you'll find it annoying at all. I don't even find it annoying. I like the refresher, okay? It's also just a solid game all around with a great story. And one of my favorite, if not my absolute favorite companion, Midna. I didn't mention this before, but I'm gonna throw it in here now. If you're possibly into handheld games, I've heard a lot of good stuff about Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap, which is a handheld game. Look into it. I've never personally played it, but from what I know of it, it might be a good option for beginners as well, if you're okay with doing a handheld game. Now, what if you've played a ton of video games, just never Nintendo? Xbox, PlayStation, PC, just not Nintendo. Well, first of all, in the words of Reggie Fils-Aimé,
what's wrong with you?
I'm just kidding. But seriously, why? Nintendo's great. You're really missing out, honestly. But if you're watching this video, I assume that you might be someone who is interested in Zelda, so that's the first start. Okay, anyway, you've played your fair share of video games, so you don't need a long tutorial. You'll grasp the controls pretty quickly. You just want to know what Zelda is all about, what makes it so great, what is a Zelda game. And while each installment in the franchise is equally unique, some I would suggest, first of all, are Breath of the Wild and Ocarina of Time, both solid choices for different reasons. Ocarina of Time is a classic, but again, Breath of the Wild is a lot more open, so there's that. But I've already talked about those, so what else? I hope this isn't bias coming into play. It might be. I'm trying. Wind Waker, specifically Wind Waker HD. Now this one, honestly, if you did GameCube Wind Waker, totally fine. The only thing is it's not as updated of graphics, but even the GameCube, the old Wind Waker, the graphics still hold up today. The HD one is just slightly brighter, and it gets rid of some of the Triforce Fetch quest. So there's that. Speaking of graphics, if you're not a Nintendo gamer yet, then you may not be fully aware of the graphics controversy that surrounded this game when it first came out. Either way, let me just say, do not let the cel-shaded graphics deter you if you are someone who is into more gritty games like Halo or Dark Souls or Assassin's Creed. But again, those games are kind of why I pointed at Breath of the Wild too. This game actually has some really dark elements to it. More importantly though, it's got really fun battle mechanics. Yeah, albeit at times a little bit easy, but really fun nonetheless. Super duper charming music and style. Ugh, it's my favorite for a reason. Great dungeons and puzzles like any Zelda game should have. And a sweet story. I like it a lot. But if you can't get past the graphics for now, then Breath of the Wild, Ocarina of Time, maybe even Majora's Mask? I mean, I wouldn't say play Majora's Mask without playing Ocarina of Time before it, but I mean, plenty of people have and it was just fine. It's just my 2 cents. Now, some of you out there might be like, I've played plenty of video games. Plenty of Nintendo video games. Just never Zelda. What do? Mario, Kirby, Yoshi, Super Smash Brothers, whatever it is, just never Zelda. You have not played Zelda yet. Again, I must say,
what's wrong with you?
Well, you'd think that this category would be pretty easy to find 1 or 2 games that fit perfectly into this category for your first Zelda game to play. Now I sound repetitive, but it's actually really difficult because I feel like the whole Zelda franchise is open to you at this point. I'm just gonna put a list out there. They're all ones that I've already mentioned, I think. Honestly, just go watch some Let's Plays, watch some gameplay yourself, read up about it. Like, if you're a Nintendo gamer, I feel like you might be able to figure this one out on your own, but just my suggestion, look into Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, Breath of the Wild, A Link Between Worlds. Maybe even Majora's Mask. And if you like 2D games, I would also suggest A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening, or just wait for Link's Awakening on the Switch. So excited. Yeah, this one was difficult. There's so many facets to this one. If you're already a Nintendo gamer, so many different things to think about. I don't know what to tell you. Now, what about someone who's maybe into retro games? You like to see where things start and how they evolve. Your task is simple. Zelda 1 for the NES. I mean, you want to see where Zelda started? You can't get much more retro than the first Zelda game, and then just go on from there as they come out. Zelda 2, The Adventures of Link, A Link to the Past, Link's Awakening but in black and white, and then Ocarina of Time, then Link's Awakening DX, then Majora's Mask, so on and so forth. Seriously, just start with Zelda 1. I mean, I find that game extremely daunting, but if you're a retro gamer and you like to see where things start, like I said, Zelda 1. Simple as that. And last but not least, the story lover. Maybe you're someone who you've never really played a Zelda game, or you've watched some footage, or you played a little bit when you were a kid but never finished one. That said, you love the lore. You know a lot about the lore, or at least some. You're really interested by the stories that are being told and the characters and the music. You're basically like me. You love stories. Well, if stories are that big of a deal to you, get your hands on either Hyrule Historia's timeline or Hyrule Encyclopedia's timeline. It doesn't really matter which one. Just get your hands on the Zelda timeline, go to the top, to Skyward Sword, start with that one, and then just keep going from there. I mean, once you get to Ocarina of Time, you have to choose, do you want to do Downfall, Child, or Adult? But in the whole Hyrule Historia and Hyrule Encyclopedia thing, it's just a couple of games in the Downfall timeline that get switched up. Don't worry about it. It doesn't really matter. It's all just made up by Nintendo anyway. I love it, but it's made up anyway. But again, kind of like with the retro gamer, your task is pretty darn simple. Start with the first one in the timeline, Skyward Sword. But once again, everyone, as I mentioned in the beginning of the list, anyway, not the beginning of the video, because I don't even know how long this video is going to be. You can't go wrong with those first three choices. A Link Between Worlds, Breath of the Wild, Ocarina of Time. All very solid choices. So if you don't know what category you fall into, or if you just don't at all, look at those three. One of those. Do all of them. Do every game, you know? And let me know what you think of them when you finish. And to the rest of you all watching that are already big fans of the Zelda series, what did you think of my input on these categories and these games? What other notes would you offer to maybe someone who wants to get other opinions, which I highly recommend getting other opinions. Please leave any helpful comments down below, not non-helpful comments like, why'd you bring up such and such game? That game stinks. That's not helpful, that's just rude. Go away. But helpful comments, absolutely 100% welcome. You know what I'm asking. But hey, if you enjoyed this video, I talk about Zelda and Disney and Harry Potter and sometimes other things in between. Every Wednesday, I've been streaming decently often recently. I've been playing through Breath of the Wild. Lots and lots of fun. You can see how terrible of a gamer I am. But again, if you liked it, consider subscribing. The videos go up on Wednesdays. But that's all for today. Thank you for watching. And of course, thank you so much to my patrons like Justin, Greg, and Andrew. Y'all's support is very much appreciated. And if anyone else would like to get in on the special stuff that I offer my patrons, just go to patreon.com/thegeekapprentice. The link is in the description below.